Should you sign a record deal? Or more importantly, should you sign a major record deal? Now, this is a really tough question, and a question that I think crops up more than you'd think, because record labels do sign a lot of artists. But one thing I do hear is people saying, I'd never sign a major, I'd never get into bed with a record label. And that answer kind of shows inexperience. It shows that you have never been in that position, and if you think like that, you probably won't be able to get into that position. So what I want to do today is I want to look at the real world scenario of what happens when you get signed to a record label. I'm going to go with not necessarily a major, but like a large record label. I want to look at the numbers. I want to look at the budgets. I want to look at income in, income out. I want to look at expectations put on you, expectations from the record label, expectations on the record label. And then after that, I want to look at how labels work and the options that you have of why you should or shouldn't sign a record label. Because if you said you should sign a record label or you shouldn't sign a record label, it's the same thing as saying, should you get married? And some people would say, I would never get married. And if you went, well, what happens if Margot Robbie comes knocking on the door and she wants to marry you? You might say, all right, well, maybe in that case I would. So every record label and every record deal is going to be slightly different. And so I'm going to go through a bunch of hypothetical but real world scenarios. But I want you to think of this as, what I don't want in the comments people saying things like, oh, that's different when I signed my record, because every record deal is different. Okay, so let's just go through roughly how this works so we can get to grips with it. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to get to the point where the record label wants to sign you. And this is all about leverage. This bit's really, really important. Now, the chances of a label just knocking on your door because Mr. EMI walked past the window and just went, well, that's the best music I've ever heard in my life, I need to sign you. Slim. Can happen. Like someone, back in the day it used to happen a lot. Nowadays, someone hearing a song or hearing you perform and just saying, this is amazing, I need to sign you, does happen. The problem if that does happen is you have no leverage. Because at the moment, unless you have something going for you, like for example, you've recorded the album or you've got big social media numbers or you've got opportunities afforded to you because of your experience as an artist, if you don't have that and you're just getting picked up off the street by Mr. EMI, then you don't have any leverage. So therefore, my advice is you probably should sign the record label because they are probably going to fleece you, but what else you got, at that moment. So I'm going to go through a hypothetical example here of an artist, a hypothetical artist that I'm going to call, because he's a rock star, Colin. Okay? Now, Colin has just got to the point where he's been offered a deal by a very large record label that we are going to call, hypothetically, Bony Music, okay? Not to be confused with GUM Music, okay? So it's Colin and Bony Music. Now, in order for Colin to get a deal on the table, before we look at what that deal is, Colin built up his leverage. Now, what that means is he funded his own songs. He put his own songs out, as in on Spotify and other DSPs. Those started to build. He used social media pretty much all as the entire sort of way of building his profile, and social media then built into the opportunities and into his Spotify numbers and other DSPs. Now, because of that, he was putting out 4, 5, 6, 7 songs, and over a period of time, one of those songs landed, okay? Now, one of those songs landed so much that playlists started to pick it up, socials was really picking it up, everything started to fly, and then he was getting, I'm going to say just for the sake of arguments, around about 100,000 spins on Spotify per day, okay? Now, if you get some big playlists, that can easily happen. Now, that doesn't take into consideration Apple Music and Amazon and Pandora and Deezer and Tidal and everything else. So we're just talking about Spotify. But because he's got that one big track and he's funded all of this himself, he now has really, really good leverage. Because at this point, the record label's going, proof of concept. Like, your social media numbers are flying. You might have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of followers by this point on, say, TikTok or maybe Instagram. You have 50,000, maybe you have 100, maybe you have 300,000, but you've got leverage where people are genuinely interested in you and going across to Spotify, and because of that, you're getting playlists and you're getting these plays. And more importantly, that's money. When people say things like, oh, there's no money in streaming, well, Colin Colin's done his homework and he's put a bunch of songs out, and this one song is doing 100,000 spins a day. Now, if he can keep that consistency, which should be okay if he's kind of building still on socials and he's building on playlists, and he's done that for 3 to 4 months, you're probably looking at about somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 for that, not per month, but over the last 3 or 4 months from that one song. Now, before everyone goes, no way, yes way, I'm dealing with this right now. So this is a hypothetical, non-hypothetical situation. So let's say, for argument's sake, he's made about $70,000 off the one track over the last 4 months, and that's still going strong. So it's still money's coming in. Labels are coming in, they're going, I can smell the money. I can smell the scaling. I can feel how this is going to go. So because he's got leverage, they're going, right, we think it's time to offer you a deal because we think we can scale it with what we can give you financially and from the experience. So then Boney Music bring him in, they have a meeting, and they say, we want to sign you, and this is what we will give you. Now, the offer on the table at the beginning starts off with a 3-album deal because the label's saying, look, if this goes well, we want to keep you on for album 2 and album 3. If it doesn't go well, we'll throw you in the bin, and that's the way it works. And these are called options. So they call it options. It's not options for you. It's options for them. But the option 1 effectively is album 1. Option 2 if they keep you on, and option 3. Now, the good thing with this is if they do keep you on, the money goes up. So then what happens is they will give you a certain amount of money, which they call an advance. Okay, now back in the day, an advance was slightly different, but nowadays a lot of labels have this thing called an advance, and that advance is different for each album. So first album, on the table, right, they're going to say, we'll give you $300,000 for your first advance, and then if we pick you up for the second album, we'll give you $500,000, $500,000, and then when it comes to option 3, we'll give you $700,000, right? And at which point you or your manager or whatever goes back in and you negotiate, you go, no, this is silly, we can't do this, and you throw some big numbers, and in the end they come back and go, best and final, 400, 600, 800. First album 400, second album 600, third album 800. That's the best and final. Do you want it? Right, now we've got a decision to make, okay? Because we've already got money coming in from that one track, which you've paid for. You own the masters. You own all of the royalties that's coming through, unless there's a couple of other songwriters on it. But predominantly, you own this. This is money's coming through to you. So now what we have to do is we have to start weighing up the math. We have to start looking at this and saying what's realistic and what isn't realistic that we can do. Can we scale it ourselves? And what can we use this money for? So the first thing you think is you go, well, 400 grand. Wow, that's pretty good. I could buy quite a lot with that 400 grand, but it's not. It's not 400 grand. And this is the bit. They call it an advance. It's not. So the first thing is you go, well, 400 grand. If you're signing to a label of that size, you're probably going to have a manager. Let's face it, if you haven't got a manager, they're going to find you a manager. This isn't one of those, I'll do everything myself. And I want this video to be realistic. So if people are saying things like, I'd make the album for free, maybe, but on the whole, life doesn't work like that. With mixing and mastering and studio time and production and producers and engineers and everything else, it does, and instruments, instrumentation, on the whole, maybe, but I'm going to give you a real world example. And it's the same thing with this. I don't need a manager. Let's be real. You're signing to a very big record label. You're probably going to need a manager. Now, the manager is probably going to be taken somewhere between 10 and 20%. Like, a good manager will probably take 20%. I'm not saying a bad manager because that's unfair, but a lesser experienced manager might do a deal with you and say, look, let's start at 15%. Now, this also depends where you are in the world, because I'm in Nashville right now. And so America and the UK, where I'm from, slightly different. And so one thing you get over here is you get management and you get is business management. So you get like two types of managers. And the business managers go, yeah, we handle all the business affairs. And the manager handles all the kind of music affairs. And so between the two, you're probably looking at about 20%, maybe a little bit more, but let's go with 20%. So therefore, you say, well, I've got 400 grand on the table, but the managers are going to take 20%, probably. So 20% of that is 80 grand. Boosh. Then we've got taxes. Now this, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of taxes because, let's face it, we all live in different places, different areas, different states in America, different countries. Everyone's got different things. So I'm not going to go into what is or isn't fair when it comes to taxes. I'm just going to say, let's go with 10% because that's probably with tax deductibles possible. So 10%. That's 40 grand. So that's coming off. And then what happens is you're saying to yourself, well, legal fees. We have to have legal fees. So on a deal this big, I can tell you that I did a deal. This is not a record deal. I did a personal deal not so long back, which was about $500,000. Well, it was $500,000. The deal that we did was about 25 grand in legals, 20 to 25 grand in legals by the time things go backwards and forwards. So let's say roughly it's going to cost you another $20,000 for your legals. So therefore, you're going, well, hang on a minute, this is like, you've got your management 20%, you've got your taxes, you've got your legal fees, so that's probably going to be about 120 grand. So you got your 400 grand, that's already gone down to 280 grand, and you're like, well, I haven't even got anything yet. Can I have the money? And then what happens is that the record label say, don't forget, you got to make a record. By the way, you're making the record. We're not making the record. This isn't an advance for you to go and, stick up your nose. This is an advance where you are in charge, like a bank loan. So you go, all right, okay, I've got to make a record. Now, at this point, everyone goes, I can make a record for nothing. The problem is the record label isn't going to let you do that because it's their money. So most artists that I talk to in I'm going with a Nashville example. Most artists would say it would be somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 to make an album. But from experience, I know that things go wrong, and it's usually a bit more. So it's probably more like 100. So somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 to make an album, 12 tracks. By the time we've done recording, instrumentation, studio, mixing, mastering, some songs that you didn't like, recording a couple of extra songs, etc. Because you're not going to just write 12 songs, record 12 songs, mix 12 songs, master 12 songs, put 12 songs out. It's not that realistic. So you're looking at another $80,000, maybe $100,000. Then after that, you got your marketing. Like what's got Colin here so far is his social media, but now we're raising the game, and Colin might be paying a social media agency, which could be anywhere from 40 to 60 grand a year for doing the socials, but that is what triggered the 70K that he's got from the one single. So we don't want to lose that. We need that socials to keep on coming, because it's like, this is a business. You put in, if he's putting in 40, but he's bringing in 200, then it's like, it's a good deal. So, because he's got other things to do. So he's got to keep that going. So therefore, per year, you might be paying, let's say, 50 grand for socials. So then it's another thing. Then after that, you've got music videos. So the label might say, look, we don't want to go full on into music videos. 2024, Damian, that twat on YouTube, he keeps telling us not to use music videos. Colin's like, yeah, but I'd like to do a couple of music videos. Music videos could cost anywhere from, we could say nothing, realistically, 5, 10, 15, 20 grand per music video. You're doing 3 of these. Now, let's say that could cost anywhere from 15 to 30 grand, depending on how big the music video is. For 3 music videos. It could be a lot more than that, but let's just go with that. So now what we've got is we've got the 280 that you had, but that recording, the album, the marketing, just the music videos, just that on its own is probably going to cost you, let's say I'd say somewhere around 200, but let's say 180,000 to be conservative. So now what we've got with all of this marketing and everything else is your 400,000 is now down to somewhere around about 100 grand. You still get 100 grand, brilliant, but your 400 has definitely gone down to 100 grand. So at which point you're going, right, I've got 100 grand, but Colin's going, well, hang on a minute, I made 70 grand off one song, which was doing really, really well, which I can piggyback off of for 3 or 4 months. So from the 100 grand doesn't sound as appealing, but the label says no, but we have a lot of links. So this isn't just as simple as the money. What we're going to do is we're going to start doing things like put you on tour. So we're going to put you on tour with big artists. Now this is Boney Music we're talking about. Boney Music don't mess around. They've got big artists, so they can get you on a tour. So this is where the type of record deal then becomes important. Are they giving you a flat out record deal, or is it a more modern 360 degree record deal? 360 degree basically means we're not paying just for the music and getting money back off the royalties. We're also going to take a percentage of other revenues, like, for example, merch, which they might say, look, we'll take 10%, 20% of your merch. And they might say, look, touring, because we're going to be the ones putting you on tour, so we're going to be taking probably 10% of your touring, maybe over a certain amount, but probably it's going to be 10% of your touring. So they're taking that money as well. But that could be a good thing, because all of a sudden, if they're putting you on tour with the Foo Fighters, then you're going to get a lot of money from that tour, not just from ticket sales, but also from your PRO, from your performing rights when you're playing these big places. They might have access to certain playlists. They might have access to certain networks that they can start to push you in. So it's not as simple as just the finances. It's also saying, well, what are you going to do for me? Because if it's just give me the money and I'll make a record and I'm back to just doing socials, well, I can do that myself. If you're going to put me on tour with some massive artists, and that's going to not just be a lot of fun because you want to be doing that, but also I'm going to be getting in front of lots of people. It gives me more opportunities, more stuff for socials, shows me off, gets more listeners, gets more people across to Spotify, etc., etc. So you start weighing it up and start going, okay, so I might only get $100,000, but then for the music, but then I might be able to get money elsewhere. True. And this is where the record labels will do something called recouping. So what they'll say is, we will give you this $400,000 for the first album, for example, and then you will get, well, you won't get, they'll say you'll get 80%, or maybe not, but you'll get 80%, if not 100, or nothing. So when I say 80%, they'll take 80%, not you'll get 80%, you'll get next to nothing. But effectively, we'll take all of the money until you've recouped the $400,000. Now, Colin is going, all right, well, I can do the math. If I've made 70K on this one song, if I've got, 12 of these songs, I could probably recoup that quite quickly, and then I'll start getting paid. So I pay off the loan. That makes complete sense. So you go, oh, all right, so I'm getting 100K. I'm making this record. We push it out. We get loads of exposure, and then that builds. I get loads of money once I've paid it off. Yes, although no, because now what happens is, and I'm not casting aspersions on all of the labels, but different labels do different things, but a recoupment changes over time. So whilst they might say it's 400K, we're giving you that as the advance, other things will crop up. Think of it like this. Have you ever booked a really low-end budget airline, right? And you're like, what a bargain. Like, I can fly from like London to Spain for $30, $30. It's like, it's a bargain. It's amazing. I'm all in. And then you get to the airport and you turn up and they go, oh, you got a bag. And you go, well, yeah, of course I've got a bag. I'm here for a week. I've got my clothes. And they go, yeah, it's going to cost you for a bag. And you go, oh, how much is it going to cost me for a bag? To go, £70. You go, oh shit, that's more than twice as much as the flight. And you go, yeah. And you go, oh, all right, well, I need a bag, so I pay that. You get on the plane starts to take off. You're like, ooh, here they come with a trolley. And they go, would you like a drink? And you go, yeah, just a water, please. That free stuff that's all over the world. And they go, water? Yeah, that's $12. And you go, for a water? And you go, yes, $12 if you want a water. And you go, God, all right, well, I need a water. So you have a water. And they go, do you want some food? And you go, yeah, how much is it going to cost? And they go, your soul. And that's the same thing. So, like, from a recoupment point of view, if it's as simple as, look, we give you the money, we put the stuff out, you pay off the money, good. But the problem here is opportunities are constantly arising. So it's like, well, what happens if we can get you on a certain tour? Or what happens if we can get you to do a certain thing? Then you'd want to do that, wouldn't you? And you say, yeah, because that might get me hundreds of thousands more people who know who I am. And they go, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's going to cost you. And now you're in the game. You're in the matrix. I won't use the word matrix. You're in the game. And what happens with the game is, the game just got really expensive because you're signed on. Your ass is now in. So therefore, when it was like, oh, it's 400 and you make the record and you get the advance, blah, 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 all of a sudden, things just got really expensive. Just like the flight. You got on and you went, oh, if I just got a water at the airport, that was really expensive, but it was $5. Well, on the plane, it's 12. And it's the same thing. So you start going, oh, this is going to cost me a lot of money. And then what happens is, if you do recoup, which you could easily recoup, if you do recoup with all of these extra costs coming in, then we go into album number 2. And you're like, album number 2, here we go. And it's like, right, album number 2, you're going to get your $600,000. You're like, banging. So this is where I'm going to make money, right? Wrong, because at this point, loads and extra costs are now going to be put onto you. So it's like, yeah, we're going to give you the $600,000, but now what we want to do is X, Y, and Z, and that's going to cost you this much money. We should go to radio. Radio tour might cost you $300,000, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, where's the money? Well, the money comes later when we get to album 3. Now, I'm making light of this because I'm making it sound like there's no money, and that's not true. But what we're saying here is, if you are an artist that is doing decently, That's where it's going to struggle. If all of a sudden you put a song out and you just go, oh, #1 in the charts, I'm touring with the biggest artists in the world, my album's gone multi-platinum, everyone wants a piece of it, yeah, great. At that point, you're going to go, yeah, look, I'm going to make money from so many different avenues. Yes, I might be on a 360 deal. Yes, I might be paying other stuff, but I'm making so much money, it doesn't make a difference. The problem is those artists are few and far between, or they potentially might take 5, 6, 7, 8 albums. Look at Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's not that old. She's on her, 11th album or something? Yes, she's a multi-gazillionaire, but at the same point, what happens when you're on album 1 or album 2 or album 3? You don't have the same leverage a lot of the time, especially for album 1, unless it goes hyper global and then you're into album 2 and album 3. Every time it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, your expenses get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you're constantly playing this sort of game of like rolling things into the next one. So let's go back to Colin and let's go back to his plight, okay? Because he sat there and he's going, well, hang on a minute, I can make money off this song. Well, maybe, but the problem here is just because that song's been doing really well for the last 3 or 4 months, playlists get bored of songs and they get dropped off, and the 100,000 spins that you were getting a day, I mean, that could be 20,000 in a month or 2 months or 3 months, and all of the income comes down. It's not going to stay there forever and ever, so you have to have more songs. So you go, oh, well, that's a problem, because I was kind of counting on the money. I might as well have taken the record deal and have all of the extra bits. So this is the important bit. When it comes to signing a record deal of should you sign the record deal, it comes down to, A, what the deal is, obviously, but more importantly, it comes down to you. And this is the bit that artists on the whole need to understand the most. Should there be record labels? Yeah, artists need record labels, but it depends who you are, what your skill set is, what your leverage is, and what you can do. So let's take 2 examples, right? Let's take Colin, right? And let's take the very well-known artist Nick D. If you don't know who Nick D is, you can go and search him. But like Colin goes, well, I've got 4 songs that I've done myself. They've cost me $5,000 each. I am making money off them, but I don't really have the money to go and make another 10 tracks. It's going to cost me $100,000. So I'm not really sure what to do, because I don't have that experience to just do them myself. And this idea of putting lots and lots of songs out, it's not really me. I don't really want to do that. I just want to turn up. I want to play music. I want someone to tell me what my schedule is. I want someone to do that work for me. Yeah, it's going to cost you money. It costs you a lot of money, because that's the shitty job. Everyone wants to turn up, walk on stage and go, love me. Of course you do. And it's like, well, who wants to do the job of the promotion, the marketing, getting the gigs, the donkey work? Nobody. So if you want to pass that off, then they're going, I'll do it, but it's going to cost you lots of money because it's a shitty job. I just want to walk on stage and be adored. And that's the way the label comes in. Whereas if someone likes, for example, Nick D says, well, hang on a minute, I can turn out a song every single week. Now, a lot of people have messaged me about Nick D, and they've just gone, what do you think of the Nick D model? Right? And the first thing I think is the Nick D model is phenomenal, and Nick D as an artist is phenomenal. The problem here is that's the same thing as me looking at Usain Bolt, right, and going, oh, what do you think of Usain Bolt as a runner? Should I just do that? It's like, yeah, if you can do that, you should do that. Of course you should. Can you imagine, right, if you're putting out a song pretty much per week, not just the writing, the recording, the production, the mixing, the master, the promotion, like, you can't take a minute off. Like, it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? Take a holiday? Nah. On to the next one. He's just like a machine. He's going another one. He's like, I'll be my own record label. I'll fund it myself. I've got all of the skills. I'll produce it myself. I'll mix it myself. I'll master it myself. I'll play all of the instruments. I'll write it myself. Another one. I'll do the social media myself. I'll film it myself. I'll edit myself. I'll post it myself. I'll figure out social media. Like, it's another one. Relentless. Go, again and again. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 over 1 year. And because of that, what happens is he's building up this massive following on Spotify, because the answer that everybody wants when it comes to why would I hit the follow button on Spotify? Why would I hit the follow button on Instagram? Why would I hit the follow button on TikTok? Why would I hit the follow button on Facebook? It's very simple, because I go, oh, I want more of that, and I don't want to miss it. So it's fear of missing out. Why would I follow your YouTube channel? Because if you put something out and I don't see it, I'll be gutted. I'm going to miss out. I'll hit the subscribe button. Now, it's the same thing. When people say, well, how do I get people to follow me on Spotify? Well, that's a really good model. If you say, well, I'm going to put out a new song every single week, so you don't want to miss it, do you? And they go, no, I don't want to miss it. And go, yeah, hit the follow button. So people go, oh, that makes sense. So I'll hit the follow button. Why? Because I don't want to miss a song every single week. Now, if you're putting out 6 songs a year, Why do I need to hit the follow button? Like, why? I'll get it. I'm sure I'll get it. 6 songs. Like, I'll see your socials. I'll hear about it. It'll be fine. But if it's one a week, I'm like, no, I don't want to miss out on one. I like them. It's this routine that we've got. And he's training the audience to have a routine as well as himself, which is why he's got like a bazillion followers on Spotify, which is nearly impossible to have unless you're a massive artist. And what that means is every single time he puts a track out, it goes into this massive release radar. So everyone who's actually following him just goes, by the way, here's the new Nick D track. And they go, oh, thank you very much. And they play it. A load of data goes in Spotify, and that goes across into playlists and start to push his music out. He does more stuff on socials. Everything's like this machine. When someone says, should I do that? I'm like, yeah. In the same way as when someone says, should I do a daily vlog like Casey Neistat? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you vlog like Casey Neistat? Because if you can, you really should do that because he's very, very good. If you go, no, I can't vlog, then no, don't do that. It's a stupid idea. Like, Casey Neistat's a phenomenon. Nick D is a phenomenon. Like, the amount of creative brain and practical brain that it takes to be able to do that is so impressive. It's fantastic. He's an incredible artist, but he's also an incredible business person. He's an incredible entrepreneur. So if you can do that, yes. If you can't do that, there's other ways. Like, that's not the only way of doing things. You have to find your skill set. You have to find your treasure. You have to find your path. And a lot of the time, a label of different sizes can come in and they can say, look, you're going to have to take a hit for maybe 3 albums, maybe 2 albums, maybe just 1 album. But think of it like this. If you sign to that album, right, and they say, look, we're putting $500,000 into you, right? And you put $500,000 and you're spending on the right stuff. You're spending on building a brand, socials, getting out there, learning how to get the best set you can, networking, all of this stuff. And then after 1 album, it hasn't really worked. And the label just go, do you know what? We're not picking you up on that option. Well, you just go, all right, well, I've just won the lottery then because now I'm out of a deal. I've now got an album out. Okay, I don't own the masters, but I've got all of this following if I've done it well because I've got all these opportunities. And now I can do this myself because not only have I learned what to do, but I've got a waiting audience that I can now sell to if I have some entrepreneurial spirit and some ambition and some work ethic. So it isn't as simple as should you sign the record deal or should you not, because it depends on you. It depends on your skills. It depends on your music. It depends on the record label. It depends on the record deal. It depends on the specifics. It depends on what you want to achieve. And so what we're learning here really is from an options perspective, you need to understand, firstly, as I always say, how to get from A to A.5, not from A to B. A to B is I've done the 3 album deal and now I'm a big artist and now I'm seeing what else is on the table. That's B. And I'm going to go on tour with a big artist and I'm going to go to radio and they all want me and I can have interviews, etc., etc. A.5 is where you go, no, that's where everyone's waiting for me. That's the bus stop where you get on the bus. That's where the manager is. That's where the labels are. That's where the money comes in, where someone says, hey, rather than sign to a record label and sign your life away for potentially 10 years, what about if I just say, I've got some money, I'll give you 50 grand, but I want the recoup plus 10%, and then after that you can have your own masters and you can have everything else, and it's not a 10-year deal. People are waiting there because they go, I want to be a part of the music and maybe I'll do that. Now they might not have the experience, but you do. And so this is the bit we have to think of. Are you a streaming artist? Because you might also say, I'm not a streaming artist, I'm a live artist. And I'm like, great. Because if you're a live artist, what we need to do is we need to go and get you 200 shows this year because you can really make money if you do the shows really, really well. Or you might say, well, I'm not really a shows artist. I'm kind of more of a social media artist. Great. Well, let's start building a brand and let's start selling things like merchandise or other things like that, or other things that you can do. If you've got the attention, then you funnel it. You funnel that attention into, for example, into an email list or through your website, into the thing that you just go, this is the thing. This is where the community gets together. This is what we do. And that could be, you know, Morgan Wallen charging $400 a ticket or whatever crazy price it is. Or it could be Chance the Rapper saying, look, buy a hat. Like, that's the thing. Buy a hat. Everyone buys a hat. And he makes $6 million a year on hats. Like, it's having the thing. But first, we have to get to 8.5 or 8.3 probably. And the more leverage you have, the better it is. If you walk into that record label meeting and you say, and they say, what have you got for me? And you go, well, I'll tell you what I've got for you. I've got 100,000 really dedicated, engaged followers on TikTok, and I've got another 50 or 60,000 or however many on Instagram who are really engaged, and every time I put a track out, They're on it and they build it straight into Spotify. And when I go on Spotify, I know that I'm generating money. You have leverage. And so that's the bit. Just having music isn't leverage. You have to be able to walk into a meeting. And if you did, imagine this. Imagine if you walked into that meeting and you went, oh, I'm making $1 million a year from Spotify. Now the label goes, half a piece of that. But you go, yeah, it's going to cost you. In the same way as if you watch Shark's Tank or Dragon's Den or those sorts of TV programs, when they know they've got a good product, they just say, I'm looking for $100,000 for 2% of the business. And they go, that values your business at $1 bazillion. And they go, yeah, it's really good, isn't it? Whereas sometimes they go in, they go, I'm looking for $20,000 for 98% of the equity. And you go, so your business is shit. It's just leverage. And that's what you're looking to do. So should you sign a record deal? I would like to know what you guys think, because I always find it really interesting listening to artists who are creatives who just say, in one breath, I don't really want to do all the shitty business stuff. I hate that stuff. I just want to play. I don't want to do socials. I don't want to do marketing. All I want to do is make music and get my music out there. And I'm like, okay, well, that's 20%. It's the most important 20%. It's the heartbeat. But at the same point, there's a bunch of stuff that you need to do, which is the shitty bit, and people will do it, but it's expensive. Now, if someone says, I'm not signing to a major record deal, or I'm not signing a record deal, the first thing I think is, well, hang on a minute. You can't have both. You can't just be like, I just want to do the music. By the way, I don't want to sign a record deal, because that's stupid. So you can sign your life away and just be like, just let me do the fun bit and take me for a ride, but I'm going to have a lot of fun on the way. I'm like, great. There's a lot of artists who do that, and they come out the other side. They went, that was wicked. I had a great time. I'm skint, but I've learned a lot. I've come out of the other side, and who knows what I'm going to do next? I'll be a carpenter or something. That's totally fine. The hard thing is when you want both. And so if you said, I want to do all of this myself, well, I don't need a record label. I can fund this myself. And that's where you need to understand the industry. So hopefully that made sense. And hopefully that was a real world example. I'm sure that some people are going to be like, that's not exactly how a certain record deal works with a certain record label. But from a lot of record labels, that's the way that, from my experience, that I see it with artists that we work with. Some artists that we're working with are going through this right now. So I'd like to know your thoughts. Should you sign a record deal? And more importantly, if one is on the table, will you sign it? And what would it take, more importantly? What would it take for you to sign that? I want to know in the comments below. Otherwise, bit of a different video. I thought I'd just have an unedited one, but thank you so much for watching. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Makes a big difference. And YouTube's like, it's a tough gig doing YouTube. Hit the like button. It just pushes out to another 20 or 30 people. Makes a huge difference. I would be very appreciative. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.